Hey guys, welcome back to my series on Next.js. In this series, we are trying to dive deep into Next.js and try to understand most of the parts about Next.js. Now, this is the second part of the particular series, and in this part, we are going to be focusing more on how the navigation works in Next.js, which is very important. And the second part is the UI components. We are going to be using a very popular library called as Shadcn for building most part of our UI. Now, before we dive in and start writing some code, I would like to show you exactly what we're trying to focus on. So I've just made up like a small little architecture to show you what is our current focus. So there are going to be a couple of pages in our movie booking application. The first one is going to be like a root page where you can see we have this header, then we have like a place for putting up the default content, and then we have the footer right here. And also this is comprised of few additional smaller components like we do in most of the React applications. Then we're going to be having a default route, which is the /movies. And we are showing the movie banner and all of the current movies that are playing in the theater. Now after this, we have one more page, which is actually linked from this page, is the movie details page. So once you click on any of the movie title, you should be taken up to a details page. The structure of the URL is also mentioned here. So it's going to be something like this: your website name /movie/movie name. And this takes you to the movie detail page where you have like this poster, you have an embedded YouTube link, then you have a place for clicking on a button where you can book the movie, and then you have few details about the movie and maybe some description. So this is going to be like a second page. Then we have some additional content pages like for the food and drinks that are available in the particular theater, and then you have some offers that are running on your application. So these are all the pages that we're going to be trying to develop in this particular video. So with that said, we need to be first of all setting up the infrastructure to get all these components ready. Now, as I told you, we're leveraging one very popular library called as Shadcn. You can just come up to this link called as ui.shadcn and explore this library further. So this particular library gives you a lot of components which you do not need to build up from scratch basically. So it gives you like this nice little accordion. You have some buttons which are automatically given to you. You have few card components which you can also leverage over here. Now, please note this is actually using the Tailwind CSS behind the scene. And this has just used Tailwind CSS to give you a starting point to develop all the UI components. This is not really like Material UI. Maybe it's more like a sort of Bootstrap where they give you like the styling and few of the components as well. And this is what we're going to be using. Now, for those who are just landing in here, you can just go to my GitHub repository. That's github.com/GauravSoni1 next-movie. And this is the place where I'm committing all of the code in case you have missed earlier. I'm going to be leaving this in the description below as well, so you can just refer it from there. Let's go ahead and start installing this Shadcn library. Now they give you the installation instruction right here for Next.js. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be copying this. As usual, I'm going to be using the npm. Let's go back to our code. And over here, I'm going to be installing the particular library. So make sure you're in the Next movie application. And over here, you can just go ahead and install it. It's going to be asking you for a few options. So let's proceed. Now it's asking you which are the style that you want to be using. We can just go with any of them. I'll just pick the New York one. Then it's asking what is the base color. So it does support sort of theming and all. So you can just choose whatever you want. Let's suppose maybe we choose zinc. Would you like to use CSS variables for theming? I'll say yes. And then it starts creating few stuff for us. And you can also see it added some Tailwind configuration, some global CSS, and all the other stuff that is required for Shadcn. Okay, so here let's see what it did. Now, if I just open up my app folder, you can check out this global CSS. It has made some changes in the global CSS according to Shadcn. One more important point is we have this thing called as component.json. Now Shadcn basically gives you a way of installing the components which we just saw now on the library. We are going to be installing few of them, so you'll get a better idea of it. Then you also have this utils.ts. This is again some sort of helper library. We don't need it right now. Okay, so now we have the basic setup done. Now for the first part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be starting off just creating of all of the routes. So for example, we know that we need a default route. Then we need a route for basically showing the movie. So it's going to be movies/Avengers. And then we need something like this FNB route and offers route. So I'll just go ahead and start creating these routes. If you have followed along in the first video, we know that everything in Nextjs, especially the routing part, is all managed using folders and files. So if we just open up the app folder, we can see that so we have the movies route already created for us. Now within the movies, we have also created a page.tsx, which was rendering up a simple movie div. Now similarly, we also need the two other routes, which is the FNB route, and we also need this offers route. So as you can imagine, we just need to be creating more folders. So for example, I'm just going to be creating a new folder over here called as FNB, and I'm going to be creating one more over here called as offers. Now the question is, how do we render these files? As I told you earlier, we need to be creating the special files called as page.tsx to notify Next.js that so these folders are routable. So if you want to be making sure that we are able to land on this route, we want to be creating a file over here called as page.tsx. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to be putting this in the offers.tsx as well. So let's copy this and put it here. Now we just need to be putting up the component, a default component, so that we can actually route to this. So I'll just pick it up from this movies.tsx and put it over here. So let's put it here and let's call this as FNB. So that's for food and beverage. And similar thing can also be done for the offers. This will be offers and over here as offers as well. So that's pretty much it. We have our routes ready. So for the next part, let's see our browser. Let's make our servers running actually. So I'll say npm run dev. So our server is now running. Let's go to the local host 3000. So this is my default route. Now if I go to /movies, I can see the movies route. If I go to the FNB, I can see the food and beverage route. And if I go to the offers, I do see the offers route. So all my routing is actually now supported. Now the interesting part is what happens if you type in something else. So something like this. Now you can see that by default Next.js gives us a 404 route. Now what if I want to be customizing this route? So in that case, Next.js actually gives you few default files that you can be using to override. So they are like error files. You have this 404 file, which you can actually be routing. And in case the 404 error hits, it's going to be showing that particular component. So going back to our code base, in the app folder, I'm going to be creating a new file and this is going to be called as not-found.tsx. Now this is again a special file similar to what we have in the page.tsx. It tells that, hey, there is a route that is not getting called, and you can actually explicitly also call this file, but Next.js automatically does this as well whenever we hit the 404 route. So I'm just going to be copying the same folder, same component structure that we had other places. So I'll just call this as not found. And over here, we can just put up a message saying that the page requested is not found. Okay, so let's go ahead and just go back to our browser. Now, if I just enter some random kind of URL, you can see that we are hitting the page requested is not found. So that's pretty good. We have landed on a custom page. We can obviously improve this further. We are going to be improving it further, but for now, let's just get all of the basic stuff running. Okay, so this looks good. Let's add that header that we need. Now, if you think about it, this header bar is going to be consistent across all of the pages. So as we know that there is a particular file which we can be using whenever we want to be sharing some sort of component down all of the other component hierarchy. So for that, we are going to be opening up the app folder and we have this file called as layout.tsx. Now layout.tsx is at the top of all the other files. Let me again present you the architecture. So I've just copied the architecture here itself instead of opening up my other terminal. And over here, if we check out the navigation, we have this app.tsx within which we have this layout and page.tsx. Then we have this movies folder within which we can again have a layout and page.tsx. And then we have the offers again, which we can have the layout and page.tsx. Now, whenever we put a layout, we are going to be nesting all of the subcomponents, or all of the subcomponents is going to be having that same UI. Now, let me just try to explain what's happening here. Let's go to the layout.tsx and we are going to be adding a new component called as header, which is also going to be valid in the case of movies and offers. So for that reason, I'm going to be creating a new component. Now, generally, when we create the components, I like to create a new folder called as components. So either within the app or even outside the app, you can create a components folder. Actually, I'm going to be creating it outside. There's a reason, because Shadcn also creates it outside. So just want to keep it consistent with that. So I'll call it as components. And within this, let's create another folder called as header. Okay, let's create a new file here called as header.tsx. Now here I'll just say as const header equals to a component, and we'll return a header. So I'll say return header, and just print over here, this is a header, and export default header. All right, now when you want to be using this header component, you can just import it into your layout.tsx. Now what I'm going to do is, you can see we have this children over here. So children basically nest all of our movies route as well as the offers route. Now since I want the header to be present across all of the other routes as well, I'm going to be putting it in the layout. So here I'll type in as header and just have that imported right here. So now my header is up. Now if I just go back to my browser, you can see that this is a header, and then we also have this on the page requested not found, because this we have just put it at the very top level. So that's okay. Let me just go to the other route. So we have the root route where we can see this is a header. If I go to the offers, I will also see that this is a header, and then we have the offers page. Okay, so let's start designing this header component. Let's go back to the code. Let's go to the headers. And in this, we are going to be returning something else. So let's get rid of this. And in the return part, I'm going to be putting as header. And within the header, we're going to be having a nav. And within the nav, we will have few links. Now just try to give you a quick overview of what you're trying to do. So in the architecture, we are going to be adding a logo soon, but for now we're just focusing on getting these buttons running. The movies, food and drinks, offers, and then we'll also try to get this button right here. So going back to the header, so we're trying to use the link tag, which is basically denoted by an a or anchor link. And in this, you can basically put in whatever link you want. But what Next.js supported, do not use this. They're given a special tag called as a link tag, which is basically used for doing all of the navigation. So in this, just go ahead and use the link tag. You can actually do few other things. If you use the link tag, you can use things for like caching and other stuff. But for now, just make sure that whenever you want to be using a link, make sure that you use the Next.js link. Okay, for the next part, I'll just copy it 3 times. So we are going to be having first one for the movies. Then you have the food and beverage. And finally, you have the offers. So this will be our 3 links. Now for the next part, I'm going to be actually making this into a drop down so that we can actually see, okay, who's the person logged in, and you also have some additional drop down options. Now this is the place where we are going to be using Shadcn component. So if I just go to the components over here, we should be having something called as the drop down menu. So that's right here, drop down menu. When you click on this, you get the drop down menu, which can actually be customizing. So over here, just go ahead and install this library. Whenever you want to be using a Shadcn component, you need to be explicitly installing them one by one. So for example, we need this drop down menu. So I'll just go ahead and copy this because it's the first time we're doing it. Let's go to the VS Code. Let's open up our terminal and let's get this installed. So I'll say npx shadcn latest add drop down menu. So it takes up a second to get this thing installed. And the reason why we created this components folder is because of this. So if you check now, we have this components, we have a header component, and Shadcn actually created another folder over here called UI, within which it put this drop down menu component. Let me again start my server. So say npm run dev. Okay, let's go back to our header and start using this drop down component. Now after the nav, I'll say as drop down menu. Now we are going to be importing it again from radix. Now we're importing this from the radix React drop-down menu. So let's do that. Now within the drop-down menu, I'll have a drop-down menu trigger. And drop-down menu trigger basically gives you like an icon of which you can basically click, and from that the drop-down will be visible. Now we need to be actually putting up a button over here so that we can click on the button which triggers the drop-down. So it won't be a text, it will actually be a button here. Now again, for the button, we need to be installing this button from the Shadcn. So again, going back to the documentation, make sure you have your documentation opened up on the side. We are going to be accessing it frequently for now. Let's go ahead and install the button. Let's go back to our code base and get the button installed. So npm Shadcn latest add button. So this is going to be adding another component over here for the button.tsx. Let's start off the server. Now for the button part, let's just type in button. Now in the button, we can actually be using another kind of UI component over here, which is going to be like an icon button instead of writing some text. So it's going to be as circle user. Now we are importing this from something called as Lucid React. When we did all the Shadcn installation, this came with it. So you can just go ahead and use this as circle user. And that's pretty much it. We have still to add some classes, but let's see if all of this is getting rendered on the screen. Just making sure my server is running. Let's go back over here. Let's go here. And if I just hit on refresh, I should actually be seeing something. Okay, not very pretty, but we do see that we have the menu available over here. Nothing really works properly, but that's okay. We'll take care of all of it. Let's start adding some classes so that this looks a little bit pretty. Now in the header, we are going to be adding some classes. So first one is just to make sure that the header is sticking on top. So I'll make this as sticky. Now we need to be sticking at the top. So we'll just make it at top 0. It has to be a flex item. So we'll make it as flex. Let's set the particular height. So you can add a height of 16. So h16, and just add the items as centered and justify between. You can see I'm getting a lot of auto completion because of this particular tool called as Codium. So this helps me to do all the AI level auto completion. So if you want, you can just explore that. Now I'm going to be adding some gap between this. So I'll say as gap as 4, maybe add some border over here as well as B, and add some background color as well as BG background. Now I'm not going through all the classes. You can just check out Tailwind and it will give you explanation of all this class if you want more details. Now finally, we'll just say as px4, and on medium screen, we can actually say as px-6. Okay. So that was regarding the headers. Let me just go ahead and save this and see how it looks. So this looks much better. Let's start styling this particular buttons as well, which you have in the nav bar. Now for the nav, I'm going to be saying as class name, flex, and maybe gap of 6. And let's make the text as large, LG, and maybe font of medium. Okay, let's save that. That looks better and also adds you a little gap. Okay, so that looks good. Maybe we can also add some styling on this button. So right now it's not really styled. So here we'll say again as class name, text as LG, then we have font as semi bold, and we have the href over here. So in the case of movies, it's going to be as /. In the case of food and beverage, we can make it as /FNB. Now make sure that this particular name is going to be matching your folder name, because that's how the routes work. And in the case of offers, we have offers. And I can just go ahead and copy this class names actually. No need to write them again. So let's copy and paste it here. Okay, let's save this. Let's see how it looks. So I think that looks much better. Now next part is just making this a bit better and also make it clickable so that we can see the menu items. So for the button, we are going to be making some changes. So again, class name, and we're going to be making this as a secondary button. So let's type in secondary. Let's change the size also maybe. So I'll say as size icon. And actually one mistake, the class is not secondary. It's a variant of secondary. Button is a variant. And if you want to be adding some class name, so you can add class name as well. So in the class name, we can say as rounded full. Now for the circle user, that is the icon basically, you can add a class name and you can set the height as 6 and width as 6 as well. So I think that should look fine. So let's go ahead and save this. And now you see that we have the secondary kind of variant and we have this nice little button. Now the only thing is when we click on that button, we want to be showing that menu items as well. So for that, we are going to be adding another thing into the drop down menu. And you can see my auto completion is already telling me to add some drop down menu content. So I'm going to be doing right that. Now in the drop down menu content, we need to be adding some drop down menu items. So again, it's giving me a nice little auto completion drop down menu items. So here it can be as my account to see the account details. And then we're going to be having maybe something else called purchases. So you can see the history of all the purchases that we have done. So that's purchases. All the previously purchased movies should be shown up over here. And then we'll just keep a logout option. I can also add some divider between the account and purchases and logout. So here you can put up as drop down menu separator, I think it's called. Drop down menu separator. Yes, that's right. So right now it's complaining over here saying not defined. So I think it did not get imported. So let me go ahead and import that. Okay. Let's save this. Let's go back. Okay. So coming back to the page, we do see it working, but there's some weird style going on over here. Just make sure that you're importing the components from the right place actually. So just going back to our code, over here we have actually everything imported from Radix UI. Actually, it should not be from Radix. It should be from this components folder. So that's my mistake. So from here /components, and from here we have the UI, and this is going to be just /drop down menu. Just make sure that you import it from the right place, the place where we installed everything. So let's save this. Let's switch back to our browser. And now here, if I just click over here, you can see we have a nice little menu. So that looks good. We are going to be working on this later, but for now, let's just get all this styling done. Now for the next part, we are going to be working on the footer. It's going to be very similar to what we have done now. Let's go back to the code base. We are done with the header. Let's create another folder in the components and let's call this as footer. And over here, we are going to be creating a new file called footer.tsx. So here we'll say as const footer equals to a component export default footer. Now for the footer part, I'm basically thinking of maybe like a logo on the left side. And then we have like two columns where we have some additional links for the website. And on the right side, we can basically be having some social icons. So that's like a 4-column kind of layout that we are looking at. So here I'll just say as return. And let's try to work on this. We are going to be creating a footer. And first part is going to be a div in which we are going to be basically adding an image. So here I'll just type in image needs to be added. We are going to be adding it shortly. Now for the next part, it's going to be first column. So I'll just add up a div and let's add a class name saying ML4. So margin left. And over here, we're going to be adding H4. This is going to be for the title. Let's give this a class name as well. So I'll say as text XL font semi bold and maybe some margin bottom of 2. And let's call this as about us. Now within this, we are going to be adding some list items. So just UL and let's add some LI. And over here, we can just say as about us. So terms and conditions. And finally, we have carriers. Let's remove the last one. So this is our first first column, sorry. It's going to be very similar. The second one, I'll just go ahead and copy this. It's going to be pretty much the same thing. And over here, we can just make it as help and support. I mean, there's some basic stuff, but let's just add it so it looks more professional. So I'll make this as refund. Let's make this as FAQ and finally privacy. So we have these two things. Let's just go to our application. Oh, we have not used the footer yet. My bad. So let's go to the layout and we're going to be adding the footer. Now I hope you know why we're adding it to the layout, because the footer is again going to be visible on all of the other pages. So I'll add up a footer over here from components and let's see if that works. So if I just scroll down, I actually see the footer actually visible over here, not at the right place, but yeah, it is visible. Let's go ahead and add some styling so that our footer is displayed in a proper way. So the footer itself is going to be having a class. So I'll make this as a grid and we'll make this as grid columns 2 and maybe, and over here, let's add maybe a gap of 4, maybe, let's see. and that looks better, I guess. So instead of gap, I'll just make this as columns 4 and add some padding of 6. Yeah, so that looks better. We still need to add the image. Now the last part that I want to be adding over here is some social icons. So let's go down, let's type in another div. And within the div, I'm going to be adding some icons. Now, if you just open up this code repository, actually I've just added the icons over here in the public folder. So these kind of static assets can be actually kept in the public folder. So within public, I have the social wherein we have this Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube icons, which we are now going to be using. Now, generally, when you're creating a React application, you might be using the image tag. And within the image tag, you might be using the source to specify the source of the image. Now in Next.js, they give you a special kind of tag, which you can be using for images. Now I would highly suggest to use all the tags that are given directly by Next.js because they are highly optimized and Next.js knows how to be working with those tags. So the tags, whenever you're working with images, is obviously called as image tag. And over here we can specify the source. So source equals to as /images/social, then over here /facebook.png. So actually it's not PNG, it's SVG. So yeah, the AI auto completion almost works, but not 100%. Now we're going to be specifying a width of maybe 30. That's something that I like to use. Now it's giving me an issue here saying that, hey, you have not used this properly. So let's make sure that we import this image tag. So let's go on the top and say import image from next image. So that should solve it. Now similar to this, we also need 2 more image tags. So I'll just duplicate this. And over here, we'll just say as Twitter. And over here, I'll just make it as YouTube. Okay, let's go back to our browser, hit refresh. We don't see anything. Well, there might be something wrong. We have created images and then social. I've just put this directly into social, my bad. So let's create a new folder within public called as images. And I'll just move all the social stuff within the images. So with that done, now it should hopefully resolve. And yes, it does. Now I just like to have them horizontally lined up. So I'll just add some styling on my div right here. So I'll say as div class name as flex. And let's add some gap of 4. And let's add it over here as self end. So it just moves up to the end and justify self end. Just save that. And now it moves up right at the end. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. Not bad at all. Now the last part is this image tag. Now again, if you go to the public folder, I have actually added this logo.png. So this is like just a generic logo which you can use. You can also import your own image if you want, or you can just use the one that I've provided. So again, since we want to be using an image, we just type in image. The src and everything is going to be pretty much same. I'm just copying and pasting it from here. And let's close this tag. And instead of social, it's just going to be within the images. We have the social. So I'll just move this within images. So we have public, then images, and then logo.png. So let's type in logo.png. And I'll just make this as logo. And the width can be probably made at 60 because I want the logo to be bigger. Let's go back to our browser. And now we can see that we have the image. So I think this footer looks not bad at all. We can work with this footer. Now, the last part that I want to be fixing is this scrolling. So I want that this thing should be remaining without the scroll and only the inner content should be scrollable. And now since we know that we have this header, we have the footer, and all of the other stuff is like a main content that is being displayed. So we can just go to our layout.tsx, and this is the place where rest of the stuff is getting rendered. So I can move all of this within another tag. So let's call this as main. And I'm going to be moving this child into the main, and we can be adding some class for this main. So we will say as class name, add some background to differentiate between the main and this one. So I'll say as slate 50. So add some padding of maybe 6, and we'll just make it as grow. Okay, so let's refresh. Okay, so now we have this nice little background to differentiate between our header, footer, and the main content. Now we are going to be fixing this scroll issue later on. For now, what I'll do is I'll just get rid of all of this content that is being shown. So for removing that, what I can do is just open up your app file. And we know that whenever we render the layout, by default on the root route, it's going to be rendering the page.tsx. So that's basically what's rendered. So I can get rid of all of this stuff because I do not really want to be showing all of this. So I'll just get rid of all of this stuff that's here. And instead I'll just put up over here as movies page. Okay. So that's done. Now if I just come back over here, we have this movies page, although it's not taking up the full height. So again, going back to the layout, to make this full height after this anti-aliased and stuff, we can be making it as H screen to make it screen height. And over here, I'll just make it as flex and flex column. So now I basically get the movies page and the header and footer. Now the nice part over here is I can actually click on the different links and the navigation is working as well. So as you can see over here, we are navigating between the different pages. So that's how easy actually it is to make everything really work. So I'm going to be taking a break over here and I'm going to be committing this code as well. And you're going to be finding this code committed on my Git repository, as I mentioned earlier. And you can actually will be finding another tag over here with this particular video. So that's going to be video number 2. And we will come back and we're going to be enhancing this further, in which we are going to be adding some more deeply nested routes. We are going to be also interacting with the databases to fetch some data from the backend and explore some more Next.js related stuff. So if you're excited, please do subscribe and drop me a comment as well, as if you are liking this video, if you want me to improve on something or cover up some particular concepts in Next.js, and I would be very happy to incorporate all of those into this particular course. So with that, have a good day and see you soon.